Hey everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for this 11th episode. What? 11 episodes? Oh my gosh, I can't believe we've been doing this for almost 3 months. So excited, so excited. Hey, Yessie! So glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. We are going to hit it off with National Cannabis News. Oh, I love it. I love those little mini blunts pre-rolls there. Thank you very much for adding that, giving me some joy over here. We are going to go over the cannabis bus, how things are looking there. We're going to go over some new science. We're going to go over what's been happening with this election and how it's impacting cannabis. OMG, I never expected to be listening to presidential candidates talk about cannabis legalization, but it has happened. And we're definitely going to hit what's going on in Michigan. There's a lot going on in Michigan, guys. If you're in Michigan and you are not paying attention to enforcement actions, you're going to get in trouble. So start paying attention now. I'd also like to point out, hey guys, I've started a Patreon. The Patreon doesn't cost anything. Come out, go in there and fill out a survey and tell me what you'd like to hear. I added a bunch of stuff from things people said. I'm covering bus. I'm covering the, what's happening on Capitol Hill. I'm covering science. I'm covering what's happening in Michigan. But if you want to hear about something else, I don't know because you haven't told me, or one person told me and I want to know if other people want to hear about it. I'm having people say, hey, why can't you go out to more live events? Okay, I did 2 live events the last 2 weeks. Did you guys like that? Do you want to see more of that? I'm working right now on digging into more things on cultivation, going to more cultivation facilities, got good feedback on that. Of course, it's hard to do that. I don't know if you guys noticed, but right in the middle of my stream, I didn't know, but my stream just stopped working. I wasn't having enough bandwidth to send after I got deeper into the cannabis facility. People want to see that. There was some people who said, hey, I should be going to these smoke parties and that kind of stuff. That's not really what I do. But that doesn't mean I can't go, but trying to convince other people that they want to be playing video games and smoking live with me, maybe I'll be able to do that if that's what you want to see. But I don't know right now because you haven't told me. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and drop a comment. I would love to know. And if you're interested in other things, that's good too. Hey, welcome Drake from Detroit. So glad to see you here. Thank you for joining. Let's go ahead and get started with talking about Cannabis Bus, guys. Now, I know I talk about this every time. I feel it. Oh, yes, it was excellent. I also enjoyed that. I have gotten so much positive feedback from that event. I am very excited that we're going to be doing another event probably in the next 6 months, and we should be doing more events like that all the time where we bring community members together and allow them to talk about what's happening to them, right? And ask each other questions, right? Leveling each other up is so important. I'm so glad you're able to come to that. And, I hope that other people will also start to come as well. I think there's a lot of value that can be gained from that. All right. So thinking of Cannabis Bus, guys, now you probably live somewhere where cannabis is legal. You may have purchased cannabis through the internet and had it drop shipped to your door. Okay, but that does not mean that law enforcement officers around the country, including the DEA, has stopped arresting people for cannabis. Okay, last year was 180,000 people were arrested for cannabis for one reason or another, right? So think about that. Remember those people in your prayers and your thoughts and your meditation, because those people's lives have been irreparably harmed by prohibition in our country. And let's talk about a few more that's happening to right now, this past week, and things that we can do to say, hey, we don't want to see that anymore, right? Get activated, get that call to action in, just reach out to your legislatures, right? Reach out to your local police department, reach out to your local prosecutor and say, hey, is this really what you want to be spending your money on? Could we instead be spending money on, I don't know, child trafficking? Perhaps, right? We have our voices and we can use them. So a bust of this past week, Texas has been doubling down. They were the #1 state arresting people and prosecuting them for cannabis crimes last year. They're on track for that to be the same this year, right? If you live in Texas, be wise. It's not safe, and the jails and prisons in Texas, the state facilities are no good. You may not be going to prison for federal crime in Texas, but you're going to end up somewhere that you don't want to be there. This past week, Citizen was arrested. They seized dozens of pounds. They happened to be just outside of a municipality that had decriminalized, right? I'm looking at you, Austin, right? So, this person was probably just bringing material to a place that thought he was going to be safe. Clearly wasn't safe, right? And, we'll end up being prosecuted for this. It's especially worth noting that we're also hearing reports again from Texas where, hey, these smoke shops have popped up everywhere, but people are, not being friendly with the local police officers, and then the local police officers make a reason to come and harass them for everything from, loitering around their agency or their spaces, or, people driving intoxicated out of their facilities, which also comes back to the new breathalyzers in our Cannabis Science section that we need to talk about, because if you're not thinking about it, you should be, because for a minute there were no tools that could be used. Yes, you 100%. This is a Louisiana man arrested in Texas. All right, this is crazy. It happens like this all the time. Man, I love so much that you guys get involved in what we're talking about on the stream. It gives me... It's crazy, right, to see people in Louisiana getting, in trouble. But, that person probably didn't get it from Louisiana, probably went over to Florida, brought it over to Texas because reasons, right? Like, there are so many places that have, or maybe they drove over to Oklahoma from Louisiana. Who knows, right? There are places to get legal cannabis nearby, but not everybody is in agreement that should be allowed. There's not supposed to be interstate commerce. But this is traditional market operation. This has been happening for generations, but people are still being harmed by this, right? Now, think about how many people won't have access to the cannabis that person was bringing in. How many people were involved with this person that might now also be arrested across the country, right? Assuming that this person left any kind of paper trail, or that they decide to cooperate with the police, law enforcement, and finding other people, right? What about this person's family, right? I'm going to assume that this person was doing a job, that this person was going to make money from this. This person might have needed to pay their rent or their mortgage or buy their kids food. And now, because we as a society haven't pushed on our legislators hard enough to say, hey, we need legalization so we stop criminalizing this plant, right? More people are being taken away, including in places like Ohio, where people have the right to medical and adult use cannabis in their state, okay? And people are still being raided. And in this case, they came in, they brought like 15 police officers, this guy, and he had like 4 plants, less than he was allowed to have. But they still came in and busted down his door and scared the crap out of his family, right? Because for some reason, they still believe that this plant is so dangerous and it's harming everybody, right? Now, this guy's saying, hey, why are you doing this to me? Why are you harassing me, right? And, the media is supporting him and asking those questions. And we might see some change in Ohio because of it, right? But he still had to experience it, right? And this is an opportunity for us, right, as other citizens to say, hey, we disagree. We don't want to see our tax dollars spent to do these kinds of activities any longer. We focus on preventing rapes across the country, or child trafficking, or let's work on making sure people don't crash cars into buildings and steal all the stuff. I know this was something I heard about. It's happening in California all the time now, where people just drive their cars through storefronts and then take all the things and drive their car away. I mean, I guess people are getting real desperate. I feel like that would really damage your car, but they probably stole the car first, right? Who knows? They're desperate for something in some way, right? So, I really feel that. I feel that in this case, again, as citizens, we have this opportunity. We could be doing this, right? Now, there are other places, which I'm just going to have to put them out there, Oklahoma, California, New York, that are legal places, but are just cracking down on unlicensed operators all over the place. You know what this says to me, right? This says that there's not enough control to make sure that everybody who wants access to cannabis has that access, right? Because if everybody already had access and there was already a constant supply coming out of licensed operations and it was cheap enough that everybody had some, would anybody need to not be licensed? Right? Would there be a reason to do that? Because if you couldn't make money doing it, right? Because it's cheaper to do it without following all these crazy rules, Would people do it? I mean, I don't think they would. But then again, I'm looking at places here in Michigan, you know, where things are getting real tight all the time. And, you know, enforcement is just coming out in gangbusters, you know, knocking on people's doors, scaring people, sending people fines, threatening people with fines, you know, doing all those things. And in some cases, we're talking about, like, little family operators. You know, people who's going to lose their house if they have to pay a fine, right? Like, we're not talking about, like, organized criminal families and, like, big multi-state operators, right? We're talking about, like, your grandma and her friends got together and opened a dispensary, right? Like, this is crazy. And that's the kind of stuff that we're seeing in California, right? Now, in some places, we are definitely seeing it a bit more. You know, in Oklahoma this past week, you know, this was an engagement between local municipal police officers and DEA coming in for a multi-state raid, right? And man, yeah. Oh, yes, I so agree with you, right? Like, sometimes you could be found innocent, but even then, right? Like, you might be found innocent and be released, okay? But for some people, myself included, if I didn't show up to work for 3 days because I was in jail, waiting patiently to be released, even if I wasn't going to be thrown away for a long time just then, I would lose my job, and then I would lose my house, and then we'd be homeless, right? I mean, like, that's the reality in our country, right? Like, you can't just be gone for a day or so while the police decide to charge you or not, because reasons like that. I feel like sometimes law enforcement just forgets that some of us are living paycheck to paycheck and missing a day, missing 2 days, you know, having to pay a court fee to get home, you know, not being able to make bail is an issue. You know, and nobody should have to deal with those issues. Nobody should have to lose a job over this plant. You know? So, in Oklahoma now, we have seen 2 times where federal agents and local law enforcement are coming in and cracking down. You know, they're saying it's a southwestern, you know, activity that's happening, right? We're seeing this cooperation between federal agents and the local municipalities and states. You know, I feel like we might be seeing more federal interaction than we've seen in maybe the last 3 or 4 years. And I'm questioning, is this the beginning of a new pattern in enforcement activity? Are we seeing what the future of rescheduling might look like, right? Where people are really going to come in and crack down like they're doing in New York right now and arrest all of the workers and all the employees and seize all this stuff and, you know, arrest all the customers that are in the store if you're an unlicensed operator. You know, they're talking millions of dollars are being seized. This is, you know, civil asset forfeiture that for decades was a revenue generating source for many law enforcement departments and states. You know, I feel like that is really something that we might want to consider. You know, I'm always concerned that if we have changes in the laws at the federal level, that's then going to end up chasing enforcement practices across the country. And that could impact, you know, normal law-abiding citizens that are just going about their regular days in unusual ways, you know, especially when it impacts workers, which we're 100% seeing in California and in New York. Right? Where, you know, these busts are happening, you know, it's, you know, how is the worker supposed to know it's a licensed or unlicensed facility? It looks really real and, you know, but it's not. Oh, hey, Yessie, I dig it, okay? Guys, everybody out there on YouTube, you can't see this, but if you're on Twitch right now, I have turned on the new Pokemon community game so that you can catch Pokemon, during the stream, should you be so inclined, and Yessie just did and caught a Popplio, and I have to say, like, I've been playing Pokemon since I was like a child. My child plays Pokemon, my nephew plays Pokemon, my friends play the Pokemon. Now we're talking about Pokemon in the Cannabis stream, which seems reasonable since I am pretty sure I have a stoned Pikachu smoking a joint painting somewhere in my house, again, because I love the Pokemon. So it all ties back in, right? I think so anyway. Okay, so speaking of, back to the cannabis, okay, guys? Right, so New York is continuing to enforce against these operators. Workers are still being arrested. You know, millions of dollars are being seized on a weekly basis. I think we're up to almost $100 million in New York now. It's kind of crazy. When we think about that, we got to think about other places like California, right, which has also been doubling down in their enforcement practices. You know, and Governor Newsom just came out and said, hey, they've already seized over $100 million from unlicensed operators. Operators who have probably been operating successfully with generations as traditional market operators in California. And they're now being put out of business. You know, 3 weeks ago, we reported on a grandma and grandpa who had their facility that they had been running in a non-California approved manner for their entirety of their life. We're talking like growing for 40 years on the same little spot on the side of the mountain. Well, not anymore. Those two are unlicensed operators now. Their plants were destroyed. You know, their facility was raided. This is just one example of what's happening out there. You know, it's a big push. It's a big difference. You know, traditional market operators have been working in California for, as I said, generations. You know, there's now this big push to get rid of them so that licensed operators, I guess, can be more successful. You know, I like to think, guys, the war on drugs didn't work. We know that. You know, it's still not working. It's impacting lives. But that people are still out there smoking the weed. You know, if the goal is to somehow convince everybody to be inside the licensed legal market, we might make it a little bit easier. You know, California is a very difficult place to be successful. I think the taxes there are like 40+%. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, right? Now, I was very surprised by how cheeky people are talking about enforcement across the country because, as you guys may have been listening, President Trump and Vice President Harris, both running for president, are now talking about cannabis legalization at the federal level openly and actively as a policy position. Right? This has never happened before, right? Like, Biden previously was like, oh, yeah, we can look at something and maybe, you know, certainly there should be medical. And, right, like, I've been very glad to see his administration move forward with, like, trying to get us through rescheduling and all that. Like, I mean, I'm really very glad about it. But, like, these are two candidates now discussing what would be the better change. Not that the change should happen. The change should happen is already a given. But how we can make the change more effectively. And that is a conversation I never thought would happen, especially when you consider, you know, all the enforcement that's happening all over the country still. You know, Trump is really leaning forward that it's a states' rights issue, which, you know, I agree. You know, I got to meet Nancy Mace and talk about, hey, look at how we could do this, where, you know, we basically say the federal government's going to get out of the way, right? And let the states decide like we do for other substances, like alcohol, for instance, right? We could do that. I thought that was great. I'm glad that Trump seems to agree with her. I've never in my life imagined that he would take a position on this, but he surprises me all the time, you know? And Harris has just doubled down on moving us towards a change, right? You know, let's get us to medical. Let's get us to you know, where everybody is allowed to do this across the country, and, you know, where it's licensed, it's taxed, it's safe, and the world is wonderful and beautiful, right? Like, I mean, that's what we've all been asking for how long now? Like, I'm excited. Okay, guys, just in case you're wondering, it is now 4:20. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that had happened. I've got a number of people in my life that this is a very big time for celebration, and I wish that they were all here with me right now, shouting about how great it was, and sparking up a nice bong or something. But that's not happening today. Such is life. My wife is off sleeping or something, I'm sure, or she would be in here jumping up and down and talking about how awesome it is. Okay, so I want to... Oh, yes, he doesn't get to have any 420 either. Sad. See, like, we're both kind of in the same position. Like, I can't do this and pet my cat and manage all of it. Like, I couldn't. I just couldn't. I would have to just be quiet, and that wouldn't help. You know, the news would be over, and that won't be good. But other people should be enjoying this and could maybe perhaps tell me what they're enjoying. I would love to know what all of you are doing for 420. Now it's 421, but still. It's 420. Well, I guess it's not 420 anymore since it's 21 after now. Such is life. Okay, so Trump has announced his position. Harris continues to double down on this. I'm pretty excited about seeing that. I started doing this activism and trying to reduce the stigma back in 1997 with Students for a Sensible Drug Policy. We're talking my lifetime here. Did I think that we would have presidential candidates talking about policy positions, not just that legalization will happen, but how it will happen, as part of the presidential conversation for the election? I never in my life did I think that would happen. This is it's amazing. It feels amazing. Guys, we can do this. We can make this happen. Keep sharing your voices. Keep telling people what you want to see. Like, the only way we're going to get this movement right, is if we all keep showing up and saying that we want it. That's why they're doing it. It's polling well, so they're doing it, right? They're getting positive feedback, so they're doing it. If they weren't getting any feedback at all, they probably wouldn't do it. If they were getting negative feedback, they probably wouldn't do it, right? So it's the constant, continuous positive nature of it, right? How much more positive can you get than 40,000 people submitting things and 97% of them say, yes, we should have rescheduling, or better, and 57% of them say, yes, we should have rescheduling, but really we should have descheduling, right? In a public comment period to the DEA of all people. Like, that's the kind of work that we need to be doing together. And I think it's important because we're not seeing any movement on the Farm Bill, guys, right? So right now, that amendment is still out there that, gives the axe to hemp operators all over the country, which nobody wants to see. That's like half of all the freaking cannabis that people are consuming in the country right now is coming from people that are operating under the Farm Bill. If we get rid of that, prices will be like double or triple. People will lose access all over the place. And, what we need is that the products are safe, right? We are seeing some harms, right? People don't know what they're doing. They're not making things safely, right? The FDA has warning letters out for people who are making claims that are false, right? The FDA has warning letters out for people who are putting too much cannabinoids in products for dogs and making dogs sick, right? We can fix that with some regulation. We don't just have to put a ban on everything, right? So if you haven't already talked to your representative and your senator about this, you should be. If you care about this, if you want to still have nice, cheap gummies delivered to your door that have hemp-derived Delta-9 in them, you better tell somebody that you want that, because otherwise you're going to lose it, right? And it would be really nice if the Senate would say what they're doing, because we're like, 5 weeks away from really when we were supposed to have this done, and they still haven't even given us a draft to show us what they're proposing. I feel like that means we're going to have another kick of the Farm Bill off to next year like we did this past year. At some point we won't pass any bills, guys, so they'll just hang out on Capitol Hill. It's, I could be a pessimist. It's possible, right? But we're also not seeing any movement in the House on legalization. We're not seeing any movement in the House on the Doobie Act, which we talked about a couple weeks ago, which makes it so that, federal workers and whatnot can't be drug tested for this, and they won't be over and over and over for cannabis moving forward, which is important because I don't know if you guys know this, but it's like 27 million people, 27 million people are either federal employees or contractors that are impacted by this. So it's like 10% of the workforce has the government saying that even if you live in a state where you can have this product, or even if you're just consuming a CBD product that might accidentally have some THC in it, right, that you're harmed by this over and over again, as though somehow you are, criminal number one, which of course the Justice Department continues to double down on when they say that you are a cannabis user and therefore you should not have access to guns, which still surprises me because crazy drunk people get access to guns and they kill people. But that's not, I don't know that crazy cannabis people are going out there. Well, I mean, I shouldn't say I don't know. I should say cannabis science tells us that domestic violence and disputes, neighborhood disputes, community disputes are reduced when people have access to cannabis from the licensed market. I mean, I feel like we all have known this the whole time, right? If your friend is drunk, he might punch you in the face. If your friend is stoned, he's probably just going to smile at you. I mean, is that not everyone else's experience? That's my experience. I've never had a person be stoned, high on cannabis, and want to be violent. Unless they were like a boxer or something and they were going to be violent anyway and they were using it as like performance, relaxation or something like that, post or pre prepped. So, speaking of science, guys, the Hill, maybe they're not going to do anything right now, but we are rocking out here with new studies. Since the MMR has passed, there have been thousands of studies that have been started. We're starting to really get that science in. We've got another, and I love this. Thank you, Pennsylvania, for spending the time and energy to do this study. Another study that's out there now showing that cannabis is not a gateway drug, which we've known for, I don't know, ever. That was always silly and not true. But now we have another that says not only do people not use other drugs that they were using in the past of cannabis, but now when they're using cannabis, they use less of them. So we know that about opiates now. And now we have another study that's just come out of Pennsylvania that says stimulants are also used less when people are consuming cannabis, right? So I'm wondering, right, if we could reduce like vast swaths of opiate and methamphetamine usage across the country if we just make cannabis accessible to the people who are self-medicating with those substances to begin with, and then they can medicate with a substance that's going to cause less harm. I mean, it seems good to me, right? And by cause less harm, I mean, they're not going to overdose from opiates, right? And they're not going to have the physical degradation from using methamphetamines. We don't see those same things with cannabis usage. I mean, that seems like a pretty nice, balanced approach to perhaps helping people with drug dependency switch from a drug that might be causing them a significant amount of harm in their family and their community to one that is safer, right? Like, even if you disagree that people shouldn't be allowed to use drugs, if you know that they're going to be using them anyway, wouldn't you rather they use one that is not going to accidentally kill them? So, I mean, that seems reasonable to me to accept that. Now, there's some other new science that's out there, guys, and I know I reported on this a few months ago, but it's starting to be used in municipalities across the country, so I feel like it's important to bring it up now. So there's a new breathalyzer that the police officers and law enforcement officers are using across the country to determine whether or not you're impaired while driving. It's different than blood tests and some other tests that they've done in the past, where they're actually able to test your saliva and see if you have consumed cannabis within like the last 10 to 15 minutes, or 30 minutes, for instance. And if you have, then you're driving while impaired, or driving under the influence. So for all those people out there that are driving a little bit buzzed, who thought it would be impossible for people to know, it's not the case any longer. Now, I'm sure there will be lawyers out there, chewing on this and figuring out ways to defend people against this. But for the short period of time, again, a law enforcement encounter that includes you having your vehicle seized and going to jail for driving while under the influence, or driving intoxicated, or driving impaired, whatever it is called in your municipality, that's a really unpleasant experience, right? Again, we talked at the top of the hour for cannabis busts. Here's cannabis busts, but you're legally allowed to use the cannabis, but you're not allowed to drive, which is all municipalities and states where you're legally allowed to have cannabis. You're not supposed to drive with it, right? It's always in the rules. Now enforcing against people for driving while consuming. This isn't even that you're consuming in the car when they catch you. No, this is you were at your house, you were consuming, then you got in the car, you went to drive somewhere, they pulled you over, they made you take this test, and now you're in trouble, right? I don't know, depending on which municipality and state you live in, some places still smelling like cannabis is probable cause to, ask you more questions, detain you, search you. In some places it's not anymore, but this is just one more way that law enforcement is looking at the cannabis plant and trying to say, hey, they don't want you to be driving while impaired. Now, there's a lot of studies out there that say that the levels of impairment are very different, right? Like, some people can consume quite a bit before ever getting to a level of impairment. Some people really can't consume at all before they get to a level of impairment. It's not quite like alcohol where, it's really shutting down your central nervous system. And so you're clearly impaired regardless of how much you consume regularly. any case, I feel like those are two important things to be putting out there, guys. And I welcome any questions. Oh, okay, guys, there's another Pokemon. Let's see here if I can figure out how to catch. Oh, she escaped. Okay, I know. Sorry, I'm slightly obsessed with what's happening in chat and these Pokemons. I shouldn't be, but you know, I've been gotta catch them all for like basically my entire life. So there you go. All right, so switching over from science and starting to talk about what's going on here in Michigan. I feel like it's really important that people understand that 5 years ago, enforcement and today's enforcement are very different. So if you're an operator and you're here in Michigan and you're not paying attention to what the CRA is saying with their bulletins, to what the CRA is saying with their training classes, to what the CRA is saying with their work groups, to what the CRA is saying when they give you a disciplinary action report that says these are the issues that we're having, and to the formal complaints that we're seeing all over the state, you're putting yourself at risk, okay? Not only that, but now they're telling you, here's a disciplinary guideline that says if you make this mistake, this is how much money you're going to have to pay for it. And let's be honest, guys, it's a lot. And I don't mean like, oh, now I got to pay like a $500 ticket, okay? Because that, you know, might be reasonable. No, this is thousands of dollars, okay, guys? And I feel like sometimes... sometimes people really are not considering this and they're not looking. You know, when I was working in pharmaceuticals, we would get a thing called the pink sheets. It would talk about every 483, which is like the same kind of investigatory, like disciplinary report that the CRA is sending out. It would talk about every warning letter. You know, it would really dig into it. And we would read these. We would read these so that we would learn from other people's mistakes. So if you're not doing that, right, you're not seeing where they've changed enforcement, okay? Because you know, last August, enforcement was almost fully focused on annual financial statements, okay? And occasionally, they were frustrated with security issues, okay? That's last August. Now, okay, in July, metric noncompliance, still annual financial statements, issues with security, okay? Metric noncompliance wasn't even a thing 2 years ago, or even last year, right? That wasn't something that they were bringing up over and over again, right? But they are now. You know, they're also, you know, it's not as much as some of the other items that happened in July, but they're still doubling down on not using reporting forms for material changes. You know, every time a person gets a fine for that, right, that reinforces for them that they're doing their jobs correctly, and they probably are going out making sure that people aren't like, I don't know, adding doors where they're not supposed to, or I don't know, what's another example that I saw that I was just kind of like, huh. Oh, somebody moved a break room, right? Like, okay, they remodeled, right? You're not supposed to do that without letting them know. They didn't let them know. Okay, now we got to go forward with disciplinary action, right? But we've got some other big ones too, right? So the second formal complaint for a processor using hemp-derived, okay, so Farm Bill derived THCA received a formal complaint today. This was for One Love Processing up in Cassin. And, you know, that's the second one. I feel like if there's one or two, there's probably 10. So we're probably going to see more of these as we move forward, guys. You know, in Michigan, we've got very squirrely rules. They came out earlier in the year with a very clear bulletin that said, don't do it. In Michigan, you know, even if you can have hemp-derived THCA through the federal loophole, okay, which is the case, and they're trying to close it in the House. We talked about that earlier in the show. The truth here is that in Michigan, right, you're not allowed to bring anything in that, when decarbed, has a higher than 0.3% percentage of Delta 9 THC in it. So, and it's worth noting that total THC is what's used here. So that's Delta 9, it's Delta 8, it's EXO, it's ISO, it's THCV, it's HHCs, right? It's acetate, like it's all of these all get lumped into one here. It's all tetrahydrocannabinols get lumped into one. It's all post-decarb as well. So, you know, there was never an opportunity for people to do this. Maybe in other states, but not in Michigan because of the way the definition was. You know, and the agency's been very specific about this. They were specific about it in February. They were specific about it in May. And now here we are with these formal complaints. You know, we had one last week for Skylabs. We have one now for One Love Processing. You know, we'll probably see more, again, because if one person was doing it, you know, of course, they told all their friends, and then all their friends started doing it. And now, you know, let's be honest, you know, they found out that people were doing this back in like March or April, right? And we're just now seeing the formal complaints because you know, the arm of the law is long but very slow. Okay, guys, they're turtles, not rabbits, but they will get there, right? We just have to be patient. You know, speaking of patience, okay, another formal came out today, where there were dozens of pop-up inspections over the last like 18 months to 2 years, over a cultivating facility that just continued to flagrantly disregard the normal rules on plant counts and security systems in the state of Michigan. Now, this is a licensed facility operating like a traditional market facility. You know, if you want to be in the traditional market where you don't care that there are rules and plant counts and security systems and locking doors, go do that. Don't pay. I mean, these people had 5, 6 licenses, right? They're paying like $100,000 a year to not operate within the rules and then get fines and get shut down. I mean, I'm not trying to tell people that they should be unlicensed operators, okay? But basically, you're an unlicensed operator, but they know where you are and you have to let them in. Like, some people are just silly. I like to say some people just don't give a fuck. And that makes me wonder why, if you're not going to give a fuck, you're participating in a licensed market where you have to like provide a lot of documentation all the time. Like, obviously, you know, they really weren't thinking about it. So the last part that I would like to cover here for this is about the documentation that was submitted for everyone. It was sent out to all stakeholders on the guidelines. And I just feel like the disciplinary guidelines are, you know, we've asked for these for years now. You know I personally asked for them multiple times, and, you know, being able to see what those look like, and, you know, kind of, you know, to have conversations with operators that I work with and say, hey guys, like, I mean, you can do this thing, right? I'm not gonna, I mean, I'm gonna advise against it, but if you do this, like, now you know what that fine will look like, okay? You know, and I'll just give a few examples, okay? So, you know, I was in a retailer about 2 years ago, and they were selling tobacco-based blunts, okay? Which is a very normal thing, okay? Like, people like to, you know, use these, and, you know, people have been doing this for generations, okay? This is not unusual, in my opinion, right? And I said, no, guys, you can't. And they were like, why can't we? You know, it's not cannabis, it's not a metric, doesn't have any weed, and everything will be fine. I'm like, because there's a law that says that you may not sell or otherwise transfer tobacco. That's why, right? And now we know if you do, it's a $10,000 fine. Now think about that, right? If they would have known at the time that they were going to be a $10,000 fine, would they have decided to do it? Would there have been enough profit for them, right? It's probably basically nothing, right? Like, you know, it's maybe one box of blunts or something like that. I feel like there's an opportunity here for lots of other places where it's like, hey, you know, what are you doing? And how are you doing it, right? So if we kind of continue down, you know, some of the things are like, hey, there's not a lot, right? You know, for instance, if you sell to somebody who's underage, right? You're gonna get a fine, and it's gonna be you know, a warning letter and then $1,000 fine. If you do it to a kid, like under 18, you're gonna get a $5,000 fine, right? Like, I know everybody out there that's holding their liquor licenses knows how much they're going to get. They're going to lose their license for X number of days. You're going to have to pay for another one. There's going to be a specific fine. Now people know that as well for marijuana establishments. You know, probably they had no idea what the consequences would have been, and now they know what they are. And I think that is great for the industry as abroad. Now, I may not agree with all of these, okay, but I agree that we've started a solid conversation. And where I don't agree, I think we have an opportunity to say, hey, like, some of these don't make a lot of sense from a standpoint of like size of business, right? So, you know, if you're a huge operator, right, there are operators that have hundreds of licenses in the state of Michigan, for instance. If you're a huge operator and you're doing a bad thing, and you get a $5,000 fine, and the fine itself would have been like the profit from doing the bad thing is like $15 million and you get a $10,000 fine, do you care? Probably not. Okay, right? So there should be some kind of proportionality that's not in here yet. That's just how I feel about it. And you know what? I'm a citizen. I'm going to use my voice. They have public hearings once a quarter. I'm going to go and I'm going to say, hey guys, I thank you so much for doing this. Here's some things that you might not have considered. Can we consider them? Can we consider how we will approach these things? Right? That's just me. I feel like that. So there's a couple of things here where you're supposed to have things on your label and everything's supposed to be tamper-proof, etc. Right? And now they're saying clearly, if you miss any of these things, they're going to charge you $250 per item that's missing. Now, when I think about this, right, because a lot of times people will say, oh, why does it really matter? Why is it that important? Well, now I can say, because every time you don't have the right information, they're going to charge you $250 when they catch you. And they will, because they can. Because your competitors will complain about you, right? Because, the person who receives it on the other end is going to be like, oh, this is wrong. And then they're going to call social support, right? Like, there are so many ways that people find out about things like this. And now you know that there's a cost to that, right? They're still saying over and over about the annual financial statements. If you don't submit it, it's a $10,000 fine. We've known that for a long time. People don't submit these all the time. 8 people didn't do it in July. 8 of them received a fine for $10,000 for not doing it on time, right? It happens. Like, we've come to know that that's what it's going to be. There's also some pretty interesting things, places where there are more than a $10,000 fine that I'd like to mention, right? So in this case, you can't accept a mature plant from anybody other than a licensed cultivator, okay? So no individuals, qualifying patients, caregivers. And if you do, right, it's between a $10,000 and a $50,000 or more fine, right? Like, it's clear, and it's for small amounts of plants, okay, guys? So, like, I don't know anybody who would do this because it just seems kind of silly. But people do silly things all the time. But this is a great one here, right? Like, don't be transferring plants in because you just paid $15 for that plant or whatever. Again, an mature plant is any plant that's taller than 8 inches. Okay, guys, 8 inches. Right, so it's not actually like an actual mature plant. It's not a flowering plant, but it's just bigger than 8 inches. If you do that, now you're gonna know that it's. We're talking like $10,000 to $20,000 per plant. I mean, it's pretty bad. Well, maybe that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Like $2,000, $2,000 to $3,000 per plant is probably not worth it, right? So that's just my opinion, and how these things go. Or not doing all the testing that you need to do before you sell or transfer the cannabis, right? Right? This means like having the compliance sticker on your stuff, right? If you don't do it, if it's missing a label, you're gonna pay $8,000. If you didn't do the testing, you sold it anyway, it's gonna be 10. I don't know anyone who would do that. Maybe they do, but now we know, right? Again, if you're not selling stuff, you're not doing it correctly, right? It's $5,000 every time you didn't do it, every transaction. If you're selling people too much in a single transaction, it's $1,000 per sale that you did that. I mean, if you're doing this and something's broken and your team doesn't know and they're like, let me sell 4 ounces, and even though I'm only supposed to sell 2.5, and they're doing it over and over again, right? Like that, certainly you're not making $1,000 per sale. So you should be looking at this, right? This is important. Right, there's some other ones in here that I thought were kind of interesting. Let me get down here to like page 4 or 5, I think it was. Also, guys, this is a 34-page document, right? So they really did put some thought into this. So if you haven't looked at it, you should. There's one in here, I think it was for 50K, and it was for reporting form. Was it that? Yeah, so in this case, hey, if you didn't, so like they have this process that says that any contract you hold for intellectual property needs to be approved by the CRA, right, before you actually start doing it. You have to do this via a reporting form, okay? If you don't do that, if you don't submit it to them before, it's a $5,000 fine. So like, seriously, guys, follow the processes, right? Like, this is literally, you had a contract, you didn't send it into the CRA. Like, how hard is it to fill out a form? Is it worth $5,000 to not fill out the form? I don't think so, right? So, and we're seeing people get in trouble for this, right? We saw 2 people get in trouble for this in June, where they had these agreements for intellectual property and management companies, and they didn't get the agreements approved by the CRA before they started the work, and they got fined, right? So we know that it's happening. It happens all the time. Oh, do I get to catch one too? Oh, it escapes. You see how it is? Yes, you got one though. Congratulations, Jesse. Glad for you. Sad for me. Womp womp womp. Yeah. So there's a section in here too that has to do with how many tags you have to do, right? So you got to process these and make things homogeneous. If you fail your homogeneity testing, or if your product is no longer homogeneous when you sell it, then you're going to get a $10,000 fine per tag. And I just want to be out there, guys. You might make a batch, and that batch might have been a big batch to begin with, and then you package it into like 1,000 smaller tags. That's like a lot of fine right up in there, okay? So like, pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure that you're doing it. You got to do the homogeneity testing on your edibles once every 6 months. They got to be there. They got to be correct. If you're not doing this, like, you got to fix that. Don't not have a giant table of when the last time your homogeneity testing was, because this is a big fine and you don't want to be dealing with that. There's a whole section now on $5,000 per each GMP violation, which I thought was grand, because I have yet to read one, okay, in any of the disciplinary action reports, but they've thought about it because they know how much they charge. It's not the same as everything, but it's $5,000 for GMP violation, and that made me happy. The next thing I saw was on employee training, right? If you don't get your employees with their food handler's license on a yearly basis, right? It's $4,000 per employee. Now, here's the crazy part, okay? How much does it cost to get the training? It's like $25, okay? So, $25 to get the training, $4,000 to not get the training. Seems like a pretty easy decision, right? And now that you know that the cost for not doing the training is going to be $4,000, of course you're going to spend the $25, right? So that's just one more example of like where having this information, I think, right, will help people make better business decisions about where the costs are going to lie. So instead of receiving fines from, and citations, right, they'll be able to know, okay, yeah, I know what that's going to be like. Similar to how, emissions people with the EPA, right? They know what the fines are going to look like, or with OSHA. They know if I accidentally kill a worker, I'm going to have to pay like, $250,000 or something like that. So they, work really hard to not kill workers. At least I think. Maybe they do. Perhaps it's not a deterrent. Maybe I think it's a deterrent because I'm like, if I kill someone, I don't want to also have, like, I carry the burden of having killed someone and I have to pay $250,000. It would just be too much for me. All right, guys. So, we're kind of coming up on the end of the hour here. Again, this is there's 34 pages. I really feel like it's, if you haven't looked at this, you should be. If you're an operator here and you haven't, it's been out for like a week, you should know. And that's why we're talking about it as the news, right? Like it's real. And, we have an opportunity right now to take what they have given us and change our behavior, right? So from July, we know that the top 3 issues were metric noncompliance, not submitting annual financial statements, and continue to have issues with security and surveillance. Cameras not working, cameras turned off, not going back 30 days. Guys, these are simple things that you should be able to control. Nobody should be getting write-ups for this. Now, it's worth noting, I have myself been written up for some things that I thought I had under control, and I didn't, right? So, look, check, make sure you're spending a little bit of time in due diligence, right? Okay, so last 10 minutes, ask me anything. Audience, do you have any questions for me about anything we talked about today or anything else? I like give an opportunity for people to say what they'd like. I wish, for me, being able to answer your questions, even if I don't know what they are, is important. I'm always looking things up. Next week, I'm very, very thankful. Brandy Zink from Americans for Safe Access here in Michigan will be coming to talk to us about all the good work that's happening with our cannabis laws. And I'm hopeful also that Legislative Aid Leader Dotson will come and join us. You know, she may not. She is very, very busy all the time. But I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have this good, solid conversation about, you know, what we're doing to try to make sure that the statutes are doing well for what we just talked about, right? Like making sure that things work well, making sure that things are easier for operators, and maybe also easier for the agency to do its job. You know, I mean, right now, you might have to fill out like 15 different pieces of paper for one business twice. Wouldn't it be nice to only have to do it once, for instance? I mean, I feel like it would because I'm the person who fills out that paperwork right now, right? So there are some other things there that I'm pretty excited about. I really hope, you know, it would be great if Jamie Lowell wanted to come talk with me. I've talked with him on his show in the past many times. I'd love for him to talk about how he feels about what's happening in the legislature and here in Michigan. You know, his voice has been very important to me in these past 4 years and kind of learning and understanding the community that's here. And I'm very grateful for the community, you know, embracing me and allowing me to be a part of what's happening up here. I'm also super, super glad, guys. You know, I really, really enjoyed the Minority Cannabis Business Association activity that happened last week. I mean, it was on Tuesday. It was amazing. You know, Drake Detroit mentioned it in the stream earlier today. You know, we had about, you know, 50 people all talking together, sharing their knowledge and information about what it's like to be an operator, what it's like to be an operator in Detroit, what it's like to be an operator in Lansing. We were talking to, you know, people from the mayor's office. Thank you so much, Kim James, for coming out for that. You know, we were able to talk to Thomas Dillard from the CRA, you know, bringing up, you know, what's going on with social equity and how, you know, the program's moving forward, you know, and, you know, he I was hoping that he would say that the world is wonderful and beautiful and we got all this cool stuff coming, but, you know, he really was honest about, hey, the world out there is difficult and we all have to keep doing this and, you know, ask for what we need when we need it. And hopefully, you know, we'll be able to have even better, you know, grants and stuff in the future. And, hey, Drake Detroit has added this here, China classifying CBD. Yes, this is true. I agree. Yes. Okay. So I did see this and, there is a lot happening at the international market space. I would say about 50% of nations, okay, are aligned with the World Health Organization, basically saying that this is safe for medicinal use and should be used in that way, you know, in a GMP manner as normal pharmaceuticals. You know, we're seeing that through Europe. It's in Europe, Australia, South Africa, you know, South Africa as a nation, many nations in Northern Africa, you know, parts of parts of Central America, and basically at this point, all of South America have agreed that not only is CBD okay for medicinal use, but that also that the THC is okay for medicinal use, as long as it's you know, medical only. You know, nobody, you know, there's a few places like Germany, right, Uruguay have kind of moved in a different way than that, but you know, we are seeing that. I feel like the in China, you know, they kind of held sway over hemp for a long time because they just didn't agree with all of these other rules. Okay, like they were the number one exporter on the planet, and now they're not. So them doing things, making changes, moving things around to, you know, better define how things are going to happen in their country, I think is reactionary and not trend setting. But that's just my opinion about it. I'm also looking to places like Japan, which like just went through an entire process of basically saying that like CBD is super dangerous, kind of flouting all of the other international organizations that are saying, no, it's not, it's a good medicinal product and we should control and regulate it in that way. So that's kind of how I'm feeling. Drake Detroit, thank you so much. That's an excellent question. I really appreciate you bringing that out here. Do we have any other questions, guys? Because if we do, I will get them answered here in the last bit of this. Again, guys, you know, you can find this later. You know, if you want to come out to my Patreon, let me see if I can do this. I haven't ever done this before. Can try to add it to the stream. I have a survey on the Patreon. Yeah, okay, I was able to add it. So hopefully you guys can see that. If you want to click it, it's great. If you go out to that, I have a survey. It has like 16 topics that you guys might want to hear me talk about, and then the place to add your own topics that you might want to hear. You know, if you want to tell me what you like, you know, I'm still doing, you know, cannabis bust, what's happening on Capitol Hill, what's happening in science, what's happening around Michigan. If you would rather see anything other than that, you know, you just got to let me know. So like, for instance, I had a phone call earlier today where someone was like, hey, let's talk about the safety of cannabis operators. And I was like, oh, that's a great topic. You know, we've talked about that a couple times here on the show, but, you know, do people want, I could do a deeper dive. We could do safety minutes in every episode. Safety minutes, I like to think of, you know, what an accident that happened and how can we prevent it. And speaking of that, let's try it today in these last 4 minutes. Okay, guys, so just what, 11 days ago, a person was using flammable substances near open flames while they were doing extraction. Now, I'm not 100% sure why they would do this to themselves, but they did. And that led to them burning their entire facility to the ground. Okay? It happens more often than I'd like to admit in the cannabis industry, traditional market, licensed market, both sides. Fires are a common occurrence. So, what does that mean? That means you should know your emergency exit route. You should have some kind of fire detection system to let other people who are in the system know to get out. You should have fire pole stations when you're working. If you're doing these activities in your home, you should have a fire extinguisher. And it's good to have a smoke detector that's going to tell the local fire department that they should come and put your fire out, right? Like, there are lots of things that you can do to take the risk, but then lower the possibility for loss of life, right? And we've had 2 major fires here in the last couple of weeks where at least one person died because they couldn't figure out how to get out of the building because there wasn't good, solid access and doors to get out. You know, one of those happened right here in Michigan. We don't want to see that kind of thing happening. I feel like that's a pretty good safety minute, guys. Maybe we could do cannabis safety at the top or the bottom of the hour moving forward, but only if you guys want it. So reach out and let me know, drop a comment, you know, send me a LinkedIn message. I'm pretty sure I put like my email. Like you can come over to Future 4200 and drop me a direct message and tell me this is what you'd like to see. All of that's on my Twitch. There are links to that so you can get to me. Thank you so much. Yessie for being here today. Thank you so much, Drake Detroit, for being here today and watching and asking such good questions. I really appreciate that. Thank you everybody else who's out here listening. You can rewatch this later, and all of the other 10 episodes prior to this one are also available on YouTube. Some of them are starting to fall off Twitch. I'm not, I'm not re-uploading them. So, but they are on the YouTube channel, which is YouTube at Cassin Coleman. So if you have questions there, oh Yessie. You just have to say it right at the end. Okay, guys. Yessie is a Lions fan. I am a Chiefs fan. I have been since, like, birth. Okay? The Lions and the Chiefs might be playing a preseason game this weekend. It could be happening. Just saying. Actually, I feel like it was yesterday. But anyway. All right. Thank you guys so much. I will see you next week. Our new time now is Fridays at 4 p.m. I think that's great. And I am looking forward to seeing you all next week and getting you guys to ask me more questions and comment to me on these subjects. You know, cannabis is near and dear to my life. Please remember, just because cannabis is free and safe where you are, just because it might be accessible to you does not mean it's accessible everywhere. So consider those people and have gratitude for the cannabis that you have access to today. Thank you and have a great weekend.